Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right?
Welcome to Plain Talk. Happy to be with you. Before the show, we were discussing the sartorial excellence of our new superintendent, Levi Bachmeier, who's joining us.
Did you say sutorial?
Sartorial, as in dress, fashion.
Wow, there's a lot of people who just left the podcast because they have to run to a dictionary.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. Maybe they'll learn something, which is an important way, a very good segue into our new top education official for the state of North Dakota, Levi Bachmeier, whose suit looks sharp and pressed even after a long day of meetings, which is just great for him. I don't even own an iron. I try to avoid buying clothing that requires me to iron it. That's where I'm at. But Levi, looking good, and now our superintendent of public instruction. Congratulations.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Chad. I too am not an ironer. I learned early on in the then Governor Burgum's campaign, when you're on the road, buy the steamer, man. It makes life a lot easier, and you don't have to learn the delicate skill of ironing.
So, Levi, yesterday is a big day for you. Obviously, the governor appointed you to fulfill the term of Kirsten Baesler if the government ever opens and Kirsten ever actually goes to Washington and gets sworn in. So you're sort of in a holding period right now, waiting for the government to open up. But I've got some bad news for you, Levi. I have been reading stuff on the internet, and people are only saying really, really good things about you. So I think it's only downhill from here. But in all seriousness,
that's not true, by the way. I read a Reddit thread that was not that was not complimentary. So
yes, well, we better send that to him. Don't want him to get too confident. But I think one of the things that's interesting, it doesn't matter what I'm reading from Democrats, Republicans, independent teachers, administrators, they've all expressed an appreciation of when they work with you, you work with them very well. One of the things I love about North Dakota education is all the stakeholders can come together and have a conversation, and we haven't fallen into sort of that the pitfalls of national education partisanship. How do you maintain that sort of momentum in the state where North Dakota, I mean, there's been some times, but how do we continue that trajectory of working together to make sure public education continues to be nonpartisan?
Yeah, it's a great question, Chad. And I think one of the most important parts of the role is you're sort of the chief trust builder. And one of the most important parts of building trust is being honest about reality. But also, being a champion and celebrating good things when they happen. So I'm honored to have the trust of Governor Armstrong and hope to build that same trust with every voter and student and teacher in North Dakota. But I think your question is a good one, and it's probably one of the most fundamental of where do we go from here? How do we go from a relatively high-performing state nationally when you look at the NAEP to the best, which I think we can be. And I think it really just comes from all of us. But in this role, I have a responsibility to ensure that the focus is on what's best for students. And I think if everybody can continue to come to the table and keep that focus and put perhaps their own specific interests second to doing what's best for kids. I think that's what's made it work here for as long as it has. I think it's a huge part of the success that we have enjoyed in North Dakota for a long time. And when we keep kids at the forefront of the decisions that we're making, that we're involving and empowering parents, that we're supporting and challenging teachers, I think good things will happen.
I want to ask a couple of logistical things. I mean, first, as Chad alluded to, your predecessor has not been appointed to her federal position yet, which is the reason she's vacating the office you've been appointed to. So tell us a little bit about that timeline. And also, you're currently a sitting member of the State Board of Higher Education. What happens with that situation? Are you resigning your seat there, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I'll start maybe with that one first. I submitted a resignation letter to the governor right after the press conference, which
That's kind of
stated that.
funny. He appoints you, and then you immediately resign
Yeah,
another position that he appointed you to.
right. And I'm grateful. It was the rumor, that Assistant Secretary Baesler may be, getting involved in this role, but the governor, I had a lot of great talks about how do we better integrate K-12 and higher ed, which I think is only more important with each passing day. So I will be stepping down from that. It is effective upon assuming my new position. So I intend to be at the State Board of Higher Ed meeting next week, and will continue to serve in my current roles for as long as the transition lasts. The other two boards that I'm on, the state superintendent has a statutorily defined seat. So it'll mean that a new citizen member will be able to join, which I think is great. So that's the logistics on the boards. And when it comes to timeline, I'm just viewing this with gratitude and seeing it as an opportunity to learn as much as I can about the new role before officially jumping in, and making sure that I do an honorable job of transitioning out of my current role. I'm a graduate of West Fargo Schools. I care a lot about this community, and I want to make sure that they remain successful when it comes to the finance operations world that I live in. So having some time to train and support an intern business manager is fine by me. So I'm just gonna learn the new role and support the my current position, West Fargo Schools. And when it happens, and I'll be excited to jump in and get to work.
Levi, there's been lots of conversations about your background working for Burgum for several years as a policy advisor, now in West Fargo as a business manager. But one thing that I haven't heard you talk a lot about was the 2 years you spent down in South Dakota on the reservations as a teacher and a principal. Can you talk a little bit about those few years and what you learned in a really high poverty, a high need school, and what you learned from that experience that you're going to bring into this job? Because I do think it's an important part of understanding all students.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the question, Chad. I will, disclaimer before I begin, I also hold a degree in education. I'm a traditionally trained teacher, and I went through the alternative certification. So I know some people have some very strong feelings about Teach for America for a lot of different reasons, but I think it will actually make me better in my new role, having seen the strengths and weaknesses of both of those approaches. But really, the premise of Teach for America is to take, mostly recent college grads, high performing students who might otherwise be going to graduate school, and put them in a domestic Peace Corps, serving some of the poorest communities in our country. And I was really drawn to that opportunity when I graduated. I was a traditionally trained teacher. Part of me felt drawn to try to go teach at West Fargo or another North Dakota school district right away. But I think, my upbringing and just interest in service really sort of made me gravitate to exploring that opportunity. And I applied and got accepted, and I got placed on the Pine Ridge Nation, which is, down in southwest South Dakota. I taught high school social studies to the whole. It's a small district, so if people are like, this guy doesn't understand rural education because he works in West Fargo, I taught at a very, very small school. I was the social studies department, and it was just an incredible experience to not only learn and grow as a teacher, but really I'd had such limited exposure to the beauties and challenges of our tribal communities, and that was an incredible learning experience. I'll be the first to say that I probably learned more from my kids than they learned from me, but I worked really hard to do as much as I could, both in the classroom and as a coach. And it was a really powerful it was a really powerful experience. I know some people are probably going to look at my resume and say, that guy only taught for 2 years. What does he know about what it means to be in the classroom? I packed a lot into those 2 years, and I have seen um, the incredible and the good, the bad, and the ugly of what it means to work in schools in America. I mean, objectively, I believe one of the poorest counties in the United States of America. Um, but to not just focus on that, to focus on the strengths and the beauty of the community and the hiking and the culture and all of those things. And it was a privilege to learn and live down there, and it's something that I intend to draw from every day in the new role.
Let's talk a little bit about education outcomes. I think we're still in a post-pandemic swoon. We saw a big drop off in some achievement scores, some test scores after the pandemic, and even understanding that test scores on anything. You mentioned, the NAEP scores specifically, us being better than a lot of states, but be that as it may, looking at the scores, they're not anything that I think we can. And this may sound harsh. I'm not sure they're anything we can really be proud of. We could be doing a lot better than we are. So talk about that. I mean, first of all, do you agree with that assessment? And second of all, how do we advance? How do we improve?
Sure, Rob. I think one of the goals that I have is everything seems to be nationalizing when it comes to politics, which means it becomes tribal, and it means that you have to fall in camp A or B. And I just really want to reject the premise that our schools are failing. But I equally want to reject the premise that our schools are perfect and that we don't have to
And
get
I don't want to be clear. I was not saying that they're
Yeah,
failing.
no.
But when you're looking at like
Yep.
40-50% of students testing proficient in reading or mathematics, even if that's better than a lot of other states, that's nothing to be satisfied with.
And I agree. And I just commenting more generally, I think, where we're at, it's easy to fall into this. I'm either pro or I'm against. And I know, in politics, the middle of the road's a dangerous place to be, but I think that's the right one here. We have to do better. We can do better. We've got the teachers to do it. I think we have the community support. We have the parents. We have the infrastructure to do it. So I think you're right. We shouldn't look at the NAEP scores and see that only one state is statistically higher than us in math and say, hey, that's good enough. I think we say we weathered the pandemic better than almost every other state in the country when it comes to performance. But we can't just say, oh, well, now that we're ranked higher, that's good enough. And so we got to keep improving. I do think it's important. I've learned a lot about state assessments in the last couple weeks. And I think it's important for people to know when we talk about proficiency in North Dakota on these tests, this proficiency isn't a bar that's set by some test maker in Texas or Washington or anywhere else. These bars are set by North Dakota teachers. And I think it's also worth noting that we have really high expectations. And so, we need to engage kids with high expectations to increase that proficiency rate. I mean, that's just an obligation that we have. But I think it's also important to note that if these teachers who came from all corners of the state and just had lower expectations, the same results, the same answers on those tests would suggest to people that we're doing a lot better. So I think it's important that we put that in context. I think these tests have an incredibly important purpose. I think they're just as much of a comparative analysis as they are a direct performance indicator. But all of that's to say, and to go back to your point that I agree with you, we have to do better. We have an obligation to these kids, and not just on standardized tests that AI will already probably is and will in the future be able to be better at than they will. But we need to have knowledge, we need to have skills, and we need to have mindsets developed and supported in these students so they can contribute in the real world.
Yeah, Levi, I love that answer about, you can love public schools and think public schools are doing a great job while still admitting they're not. Public schools are not pitching a perfect game, right? If you love something, you put time in it and you're willing to be critical of things that need to get better. And I think that a lot of the time, you're right, people do fall into that camp. Either they're failing completely or they can't do anything wrong. So I think your approach is exactly right. I want to ask you about, you shared a podium with Governor Armstrong, and when he's talking about education, there's one issue that continuously comes up, and that's the cell phone ban. You're obviously living this firsthand in West Fargo, both you and your wife, who I believe is a principal in West Fargo. And tell us how it's working in West Fargo. Were you supportive? Were you concerned about it? Sort of what was your opinion going in, and what's your opinion now that it's been implemented for several months?
So my wife and I have two young daughters. Our eldest isn't yet two, and technology frankly terrifies me when it comes to raising two girls in today's world. And maybe we can have a separate debate on, I think you guys had a podcast on Pat Trainor's comments, and we probably don't have time to get super deep into all of that. But I would say, supportive, a little concerned about what that would look like at the high school level when kids could protest by going out to their cars and just leaving campus, which would probably undermine our goal of having them talk to each other. But I think students have responded with the permission structure to talk to each other again in a really positive way. I said this yesterday. I think one of the most powerful, stories that I've heard from the school buildings in West Fargo anyway came from an assistant principal who nearly had tears in her eyes when we were talking about this. And she said the lunchrooms are loud again. And what a great, just a great moment to capture not only, what we expect from our schools is not only academic performance, but helping students build lifelong friends and build social skills and communication skills and all of these things that they're going to need in the real world. And if you're staring down at your phone, you're not really doing that. So I was pretty scared about what it might mean. One of my roles as business manager is to support our food service director. She was terrified. Are we gonna have to lay off high school food service staff because kids just leave to use their phones? But I think kids are, especially high school students, are probably a little smarter than we give them credit for. And by creating the permission structure and knowing that there aren't other students who are on their phones all the time, it makes it easier for them to engage with the people around them. So I thank Governor Armstrong for his leadership. I would say, talking to school leaders across our big district, everyone sort of agrees it's going, a lot better than I think people expected. No one wanted to only be dealing with phone discipline issues and not focusing on instruction. But while there's always a couple of those, it really, I think, has been, I think it's been successful and has been doing what the bill intended to accomplish.
Yeah.
I will refrain from turning this into a debate. But I don't know. I think the kids were talking before. They're just now talking in a way that's more recognizable to the old people. So I don't know. The proof will be in
How
the
dare you call Levi old?
Yeah, well, he's significantly younger than I am. I'll put it that way. And a heck of a lot younger than you are, Chad. I don't know. I think we're all patting ourselves on the back for doing something that, the results aren't in yet. So let's pump the brakes. We'll find out. Let's talk politics a little bit though, Levi, because this is an elected position you're in now. And because you're appointed, even though Kirsten Baesler was just elected to a new term last year, because you're appointed, you're going to have to appear on the next general election ballot. Kirsten always sought the Republican endorsement. You're a Republican. You've served as a district chair in the Republican Party, so I'm assuming you would take, even though this office is officially nonpartisan, traditionally the candidates have sought party endorsements. Kirsten Baesler had kind of a fraught relationship with the party. She was actually rejected the endorsement at the last state convention. So what does that path look like to you? Now, I should point out, Kirsten went on to win handily in the primary and the general election. She had no problems at all getting reelected. But what does that path look like for you? Speak about that. This will really be the first time, right? First time you'll ever be on the ballot?
It will. I'm going to be honest, Rob, I haven't spent a second thinking about the politics of this. I've been really focused on just thinking through how do I do the job well and hope that if that's done well, the politics will take care of itself. But it's a fair question. I won't be seeking, the Democratic convention support. And I'm going to have to think really hard about what I do as a Republican when it comes to running for a nonpartisan seat. I found a book, a digital book from the state library that sort of traced the history of the Department of Public Instruction from its inception as Dakota Territory through the early 1930s. The author was the state superintendent at the time. It was effectively a report to the legislature, and she called an era shortly before the rise of the nonpartisan league in the late teens, the golden era of the department, and characterized it as stable and nonpartisan. And so I think, with Kirsten moving on to Washington, I think it's important to people to know, my political beliefs. I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative, but when it comes to how do I approach this question as someone who's seeking an officially nonpartisan position, I'm going to think about that because I think one of the big issues we were talking about a little bit earlier in terms of tribalism is one of the surest ways to erode trust in public schools is if parents think that schools are political one way or the other, and I take that really seriously. So intend to ensure that I'm not naive enough to assume that when you're dealing with people's most precious resources, their kids and their tax dollars that are taken from them, that this is an inherently political job. But I'm going to work really hard to make sure that it's not partisan, and that's going to influence how I approach, your question about the conventions.
Levi, you mentioned earlier having two young children, very young children, a wife who's an education leader herself. The Forum reported that the family's not moving to Bismarck, although I did recognize at your press conference how many times you said you were happy to be in Bismarck, and we're happy to have you in Bismarck as a Bismarckian. This is going to be tough, right? I mean, there's no doubt when you're thinking about taking this appointment and you and Rachel had the conversations, your family was a big part of this conversation. Can you talk a little bit about the mechanics of how you're going to do this job, which is based in the state capital, your family's in West Fargo, and how do you balance those things? Because and wanting to be out in schools a lot as well. And so maybe that makes it easier because you're going to be traveling anyway. So can you just talk a little bit about your thought process there and how you're going to handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you sort of answered the question for me, Chad. I think the only way to do this well is to get in the truck. I'm not going to be able to visit all 168 school districts in a year, but one of the things that I learned working for Governor Burgum is people expect that you go to them and hear about what's working well and what's not. And so I'll be on the road a lot. So knowing that that's how I want to approach the work, not only leading the team in Bismarck in the state capital, I'm a big believer of eye to eye and elbow to elbow, teamwork. So I'm going to be in Bismarck doing that work, but I'm also going to be visiting schools a lot. And so sort of through that lens, it was what's best for our family. One with two young kids, we don't have any family, any supports in Bismarck. My parents are an incredible support for us right now, having two big jobs. It's really important that our kids grow up around family is one piece. And then, the second thing is I only hope to love this job as much as my wife loves hers. And as someone who's, a husband and a dad first and a worker second, I would never ask her to give up her dream to support mine. And she lived and taught at West Fargo High School when I worked in the governor's office, and I did a lot of driving. And so that's what it's going to entail. It's going to entail a lot of driving, but keeping the focus on what's best for our family while also ensuring that I do the job that our students deserve.
Your predecessor, I guess not quite predecessor yet, but when she becomes your predecessor, she is going to be going to a Washington D.C. where the focus is on really eliminating a lot of the federal administration of education in our state, and that's one thing that Kirsten Baesler has said that she wants to help facilitate that and flow some of that policy back to the states. What is your attitude about that? How do you feel about that as someone who's now going to be, the standing, at the top of North Dakota's public education system?
Well, I mean, as someone who's sort of philosophically conservative, I think the general direction to empower the states is a great one. I did a fellowship at the Department of Education. I've been there. I think, this conversation over the Department of Ed is sort of a political football that doesn't actually matter for kids. So I haven't spent a ton of time thinking about it, because whether there's X or Y or Z number of employees at US Ed, um, I, I struggle to see how that's going to have a material impact on our students. So I think it has an outsized political focus, but when it comes to the work that we're going to do here in North Dakota, I think the more empowerment that the states can have, the better. Those resources, particularly for our low income and disabled students, are important. And hope that those continue to flow without delay. But I'm really not too worried about it. Whether there's a Department of Education, I mean, there's going to be one. Congress is not going to close it. So whatever it looks like, I'm not going to lose too much sleep over, the number of FTEs that are living in Washington, at the expense of focusing on things that I think will really move the needle for kids. And that's what's going on in our classrooms.
Levi, one of the things you talked about this at the press conference yesterday, but when you were going through the interview process, when the governor made this appointment, were there any things that he said, Levi, as superintendent, you have to do this, or you have to help me accomplish this goal? Again, I know you sort of alluded to this at the press conference, and Kelly did as well, but can you respond? Were there any strings attached policy-wise when the governor appointed you to this job?
No, none whatsoever. We had a chance to chat a little bit beforehand about, what are some things that we can work on. And Kelly is an incredibly passionate and intelligent governor. And I think the expectation is that we have the debate if we don't, agree. So I can learn where he's coming from, and he can challenge me, and I can do the same with him. And I think that's what makes good policy. So no strings attached, no litmus test, no, support this veto. I was grateful. I was completely aligned with how he approached a lot of the ed policy conversations. I don't think choice is inherently a 4-letter word. I think it will be really interesting to see what happens with these charter schools. They play by the same rules. And so can we learn some interesting things that can help all of our public schools? So I look forward to working with the governor's office. They have an incredibly important role in the conversations about education. Obviously, as the former policy director, I know what that office does and how deeply it cares about the state. So looking forward to the debates. Kelly's an attorney, so I'm gonna have to sharpen up my debate skills, but I think that's only gonna make us better. And I really appreciate, Kelly said at the press conference yesterday that he knows that I'll have a good sense on how does the theoretical policy debate actually get implemented in the classroom. And I think that that's foundationally important. And I intend to be talking to a lot of people who are working in schools because it'll be different for me. I have a decent pulse right now, but I'm not in the classroom either. And I won't assume that. So I think it's working with the practitioners to understand, what might work and what might not work, but also challenging them to think differently. And back to Rob's earlier point, we have to continue to improve, and nobody wants the definition of insanity, which is just doing the same thing over and over again. So if we can really focus on the practices and the approaches that move the needle, and we have a realistic understanding of how those will actually play out in the classroom, I'm pretty optimistic that we can do some great things for kids.
Levi, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Levi.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name's Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Welcome back. Just finished up with Levi Bachmeier, who is a great pick, Chad. I think he's got the he's got experience on both sides of the fence. Granted, I mean, classroom teacher for a couple years, but he does have that experience, but also on the administrative side, which, I mean, let's be honest, it's nice that he knows what a classroom looks like and he's been in one and he's actually taught, but most of the superintendent job is administration. In fact, the superintendent is rarely teaching in a classroom, if ever. So, he's an administrator, and I think he is well equipped. He's worked in politics. He's worked on the policy side. He's got a fine resume for this.
Yeah, I think Levi is super, super smart. I think his balance of knowledge of policy and politics is going to benefit him very, very well. I do think the 2 years of classroom experience, particularly where he had the years of classroom experience, is going to always have a lens. Like he'll never lose that lens of what it means in a low income school, like the decisions he's being made. He understands school finance exceptionally well. He's done some incredible stuff on health insurance in West Fargo. There's work that still needs to be done. And I wasn't kidding. I mean, you said you found a Reddit thread of people who didn't like Levi, but the sort of but in all honesty, like the people who care about public education that I've seen all love the pick. The sort of normal folks not on the fringe really, really like the pick. Do I think Levi is going to get challenged from somebody on the far right? Absolutely. Just like Baesler always did. But also his just sort of the nonpartisan nature of public schools. We can't have parents thinking our public schools are one way or another. Yes, yes, yes. That's exactly right. So I don't know if you had a chance to watch the press conference yesterday, but like the guy's polished. I mean, he can answer a question. He didn't shy away. And so I'm excited about what this means. I'm excited for potentially more trust between the districts and the superintendent's office, which I think has been lost over the last several years. But I think it's a good pick.
I really agree with that. I thought his most interesting, and maybe just because, I'm a political guy, so that's where my mind went is, and the reality is for a job like his, you don't get to do it unless you win an election.
Yep.
I mean, obviously he gets to do it until next year in the election, and we'll see what the voters have to say. But it's going to be interesting. He is a Republican. He worked for a Republican governor. He was a Republican district chair. He's a Republican and a conservative. I really appreciate that he doesn't bring that overwhelming ideology. I mean, he's not coming in with an ideological agenda. He wants to make things work and work well. And that's, I think, all we can ask from any candidate. But he does have to navigate that process. And I thought it was interesting. It's a question mark whether he's going to go to the party's state convention.
I think it's going to be Levi Bachmeier and a bunch of other prominent Republican elected officials making a decision en masse of how they're going to handle it. I don't think it's going to be about like some will go, some won't. I think it's going to be sort of that
seems to be where it's trending. And I've heard some hot talk. And before the last convention, there was some hot talk about statewide not going, and they ended up going.
Yeah.
Then we saw that it was kind of, I think Julie Fedorchak was treated, poorly. I think Kirsten Baesler was treated poorly. I think House Majority Leader Mike LaFleur in his district was treated poorly. And I think that there is a feeling that, why would I go? Like if I'm a moderate, middle of the road, traditionally conservative Republican, what is the benefit of this other than being publicly humiliated, beat up, and then going on to win in the primary anyway? And he's in again, this is a little bit of a unique position because this is a nonpartisan position. The party endorsement has, for any other candidate, if you receive the party endorsement, you get to automatically go on the June primary ballot. You don't have to collect signatures. Well, that's not the case for Levi anyway. There's really nothing here other than, I guess, symbolically. And it is going to be interesting because I don't think it's going to be Levi Bachmeier. I think you're exactly right. It's not going to be Levi Bachmeier in a vacuum by himself. There's going to be a decision made by all the statewides who are up, starting with Julie Fedorchak, who's on the ballot again, obviously every 2 years being in the House. So it's going to be interesting to see the decisions they make.
I also think the DPI election, obviously Senator Axman made it perfectly clear she wanted this appointment. She didn't get the appointment. Does she now look at running? I would be surprised if she does, because Levi is now the governor's pick, and the governor is going to make sure that Levi wins this election. But I think that the governor picks somebody who has broad appeal electorally, can raise a ton of money. I mean, he's connected to the Burgum world. He's obviously connected to the Armstrong world. But that's the only thing that would sort of throw this thing off. If somebody like Michelle Axman says, it's great that you appointed him, but I think I'd be better. And she has every right to do that, right?
Right.
I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I would not. I mean, if she made that decision, I would not begrudge her that. She has every right to make that argument. The thing is, I don't really view a lot of daylight between the two of them. Now, granted, Levi hasn't exactly been in a position to be making public policy, but I do know him pretty well.
Right.
I just don't perceive that. I mean, I'm sure there's a few key areas where they disagree, but generally, I mean, I think it's kind of two sides of the same coin with them.
So the one policy difference is public school advocates would really like Levi Bachmeier, and they didn't really enjoy their time with Michelle Axman last session. How's that?
Over the school choice thing, yeah.
Over vouchers specifically, because I think Levi also makes a good choice. When we talk about choice, we just talk about public dollars going to private schools, but choice also can mean public charters. It can also mean transferring between public school districts. Like, we have choice that allows us to sort of move about pretty freely. It's the public dollars going to private schools that I think would probably be the biggest. And I mean, she has no education background, right? I mean, like, other than serving on the education committee and having kids, Levi's been in the trenches. So, I mean, there's some resume difference.
It makes me wonder, because with Senator Axman, I mean, she has said on the record on this podcast that she wants to be governor one day. So her political aspirations are beyond the superintendent's office.
Right.
And it makes me wonder, with Levi there, young guy, I don't think is going to have any problem getting elected and then reelected. He's going to be there for a while. Maybe Senator Axman finds a different path. I think
I was actually thinking about that exact thing, Rob, and I think her not getting this appointment might be better for her to become governor. I mean, think about our history and how many constitutional officers have ended up being governor. The last one was Alan Olson. Right. That's not the path generally. I mean, because you've had 3 attorney generals who've lost races for governor, and it's mostly been legislative, outsiders, Dalrymple legislative, then lieutenant governor. So I'm not sure being in a bureaucratic job in the state capitol is the best path if Michelle Axman wants to be governor. This might be something good for her.
Well, especially one that's so central. I mean, love it or hate it, and I hate it personally, our schools have become these epicenters of
everything,
culture wars. And so you're in that superintendent position, and now you have to make real world decisions that impact, arguably, obviously one of the most important policy areas that affects children. And now you're in the middle of it. Politically, it's not a stepping stone, really.
Yep. I agree 100%. I think that's exactly spot on.
So I think she probably finds a different path, but I don't know. And the thing is, if she wanted to go, I would give her a hard look. She is a competent, smart person. I know that you didn't like some of her advocacy on a specific policy, but I think we both agree, very accomplished, very smart, certainly, worth considering. And I would consider it, but.
So I think she's absolutely whip smart. I mean, she's absolutely whip smart. She advocated for a position I disagreed with. But I have great respect for her. I just don't think this is the path to get to her ultimate career goal. And also it'd be sort of if she would run, or somebody like her who wanted the appointment and then decide, it's sort of a slap to the governor as well. And I know that she's close with the governor's team, so I'd be surprised if she does it.
Our Levi, after the interview, texted me, said, "Thanks for having me on. Let's debate smartphones sometime, old man." So we may have to have him on specifically about cell phones. Hey, let's talk No Kings, because there were some protests since the last time we recorded this show. Big turnout across North Dakota again. I mean, more than was it 9 communities? 10?
Yeah, I don't even know what the number
I
was.
think
Because
a
there's
lot.
places like Botno were having them.
Valley City, Williston, right? These are not liberal bastions.
Right.
And so they, they had and strong turnout. I mean, I don't know that I saw, I mean, just looking at social media pictures and media pictures, I don't know that I saw one where the attendance was that I would estimate less than a couple hundred, even in some of these smaller communities. So that is a strong turnout statewide. You and I have talked before about whether this changes the tide, whether this, affects anything. I don't know that there's really I mean, maybe the couple legislative seats. I don't sense like a wave election coming in North Dakota.
I agree.
Nationally, I think might be a different story. Although it was kind of interesting, and I wrote a column about it. Well, first of all, 2 things. I hated, in fact, this calling these rallies Hate America rallies, calling them terrorists and extremists and everything. And then, Senator Kramer putting out a press release calling the protesters left-wing wackos. And the thing that bothered me about that is I have some history with Kevin Kramer when it comes to protesting. Circa 2009, I was a punk blogger, and he was a public service commissioner, fresh off losing 2 federal races against our friend Earl Pomeroy. And, kind of at the nadir of his political career. And we invited him to speak at Tea Party rallies because I think he really understood the movement. I think he really had interesting things to say. And so we invited him and he spoke. And I remember standing, stage right, listening to him rail against Democrats who were saying that we were carrying swastikas around and we were racists and bigots and extremists and cessationists. And he railed against that. And he was right. That was a terrible mistake that Democrats made, belittling that movement. And in fact, I think it was a mistake that in some ways they're still paying for today. When you want to talk about the complete erosion in trust in Democrats from people, particularly in our part of the world, he was right about that. And so I was absolutely bewildered when he said that thing about left-wing wackos, because it made me think, I mean, not only is it not true, it's a lot of perfectly reasonable, most of them perfectly reasonable. And listen, there's a few weirdos that show up at any public protest, but I mean, it's just reasonable people who agree with them or not. They have an argument that they're trying to make. They have a point of view they're trying to express about the way our country is being governed right now. And for him to call them wackos, it makes me think, like, do you not remember what it was like to be in that position? I mean, did you not understand where it was? Because by the way, when we were holding those Tea Party rallies, every member of North Dakota's congressional delegation was a Democrat.
Right.
It was a different time. So I just, not only was it inaccurate and untrue and unfair, but it was bad. I perceived it as bad politics. Now maybe the political calculus has changed and that doesn't matter anymore, but.
Right. So I did not go to the No Kings rally this time, but I did go to the previous one. And I will just say, from my perspective in Bismarck, they were joyful. It was people feeling good about standing up for themselves and what they believed in.
Funny signs, funny costumes.
Yeah, right. And it was people who were like, oh, there's people like me, right? And I think at a time when people want some community and are feeling isolated, it's a joyful thing. Kevin Kramer's comments, I will tell you, there's not a lot that politicians can say these days that really pisses me off. Kevin Kramer is talking about my mom. My mom was at the No Kings protest. Talking about a lot of former Republican elected officials who go to these things, and Republican bureaucrats and grandmas and grandpas and t-ball coaches and teachers and all these things. And he was calling each and every one of us left-wing nut jobs. He wasn't calling Nancy Pelosi a left-wing nut job. He was calling my mom a left-wing nut job. Alice Oban's not a left-wing nut job. She cares about her community. She cares about her grandkids. She cares about her children. And so I don't know if it's Kevin Kramer's gone a little Washington and he's lost touch with who the people are that disagree with him. But Rob, you were talking about the Tea Party thing, and I bet I was one of the people who was calling the Tea Partiers a lot of names. And that was wrong.
Yeah.
And I regret that. I also wasn't a U.S. Senator back in 2009. And I think that these are people that Kevin Cramer is supposed to represent, not just his followers' interests as the North Dakota U.S. Senator, but all of our interests. He's my U.S. Senator. He doesn't get to call me a nut job. That's not the way this works.
And I think I really wanted to call his comments out because, and this is not me trying to minimize them at all. I was obviously very critical of them. But, I mean, they were also kind of in the shadow of, Majority Whip Tom Emmer from Minnesota calling the protesters terrorists. In the Hate America rallies is what they called it. And, I think that is so destructive, this idea that, and I've been thinking a lot about this, like why does democracy work? And it works because it's a market, the old side, it's a marketplace of ideas, right? And I think I use that because it's true. It's a marketplace of ideas, but marketplaces work when you stop buying bad products. And the partisanship that we have right now demands that you never stop buying the product, no matter how bad it gets, no matter how eye-wateringly terrible. Doesn't matter if the trade tariffs are wrecking your business, or your health insurance premiums are going through the roof, or inflation is still taking a giant bite out of your monthly budget. You're just supposed to keep voting for the team, and it doesn't matter. And democracy doesn't work that way. I mean, at some point, like if you're buying a loaf of bread, and then eventually the price of the loaf of bread goes up and you keep getting moldy slices in there, you stop buying that piece of bread. You stop buying that loaf of bread, you go shop for another loaf of bread. If you don't do that in a democracy. So I've been thinking a lot about that right now, where it's just this. And so this idea that anybody, listen, I know people who have gone to No King protesters who have voted for a lot of Republicans over the years, and they're unhappy right now. And that is their right as Americans to say, I want to change course. This team's not doing it for me anymore. I'm going to try supporting the other team for a while, or an independent team, or what have you. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not un-American. It doesn't make you an extremist, and it doesn't make you a terrorist.
And not even necessarily saying, I want to support another team. Some of them are just saying, I want my team to get back on track.
Or that, sure.
I think there's a lot of people who are frustrated, but again, calling names, belittling is beneath a U.S. Senator, but maybe it's not when we have the president calling
we
people
we say that, but look at the way they're all behaving now. I mean, what's beneath
should be
elected official anymore?
Should be beneath a U.S.
I
Senator.
agree with
but
that.
I think the comments were disappointing, though, mostly because, Kevin Cramer knows people in these communities. He could have walked through that rally over there, and there was no arrests. There was nothing that was not peaceful. I mean, these are just a bunch of people from your community getting together and expressing an opinion. And if we can't do that in America, we've got a lot bigger problems than I would have ever guessed.
There is nothing that's more American than standing out and publicly saying our politicians are getting it wrong. That is fundamentally American. So I really want to reiterate, because I think it's well made. Not only does Kevin Cramer know those people, not only could he probably have walked to those crowds and shook some hands and probably got a few raspberries along the way too.
Right.
He used to do stuff like that. I remember when a lot of the left-wing groups were organizing town halls, like that was the big thing. And he went to a town hall that was sponsored by Indivisible, which is a pretty hard left group. He went there and he got yelled at a little bit and he got booed, but he went there and he just talked to him. And I feel like he's lost that. Like he forgot about that. He has forgotten that these people are his constituents. And that used to be central to his political success, where he would show up anywhere, he would talk to anyone, but now they're wackos and terrorists because that's the party line coming out of the White House.
And the other thing about Kevin Cramer, and it drives me crazy, he can go to those environments and handle himself just fine, right? I mean, it's not like he's going in there and he comes out all bruised. He can make jokes, he can do those things.
He wins people over.
Yeah.
I know that's annoying to you. I've always appreciated it about it. Like isn't that the whole point, is to persuade people and win them over and at least make them think, gosh, he's not such a bad guy. But now your senator's saying, oh, if you oppose what's going on in Washington right now, you're a whack job, and my colleagues are calling you terrorists and everything else. I think, boy, you don't care about all your constituents anymore.
and our president is tweeting out or whatever he's doing, Xing out or Facebooking out, poop falling from a plane onto all kinds of people. I feel like our leadership is a bunch of 8-year-olds right now. And by the way, open the damn government, get it done. I'm going to go off on a little bit of a rant here. I am tired of reading articles about Julie Fedorchak blaming this on the minority party while she's in Bismarck or while she's in North Dakota. Go to Washington, D.C., open the damn government. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, call the House Republicans back, get in a room, figure this out, open the damn government.
Maybe while you're at it, seat that congresswoman who was duly elected from Arizona.
Right.
Maybe do the people of Arizona the courtesy of seating their elected representative in the chamber.
Even if she's from another party and disagrees with you, come on.
It might then force an inconvenient vote on releasing the Epstein files,
which I still don't understand. Like, you're part of what you're standing up for is pro pedophile. I mean, I don't get it. Julie Fedorchak.
And the thing about, sorry, go ahead, finish your point.
I was just going to say, I want my congresswoman to go back to Washington and help open up the government. I know she's one of 435.
I care less about where Julie Fedorchak is. I mean, I take your point. Your point's well made. Geographically, I don't care, because I think as soon as the House reopens, she'll go there. But this blame game, I mean, listen, the fundamental reality of governing in a republic like ours is sometimes you have to give the other side some of what they want. The Democrats are in a position right now where they don't have to budge until they get something that they want. You better get in a room and figure that out. I mean, that's just the reality. It is frustrating. And then everybody sits around and blames the game. They all want to point fingers. None of them want to point fingers at themselves. They're all perfect paragons and all the problems on the other side. It's just not true. There's so much blame to go around in Washington right now. But in the meantime, Americans are hurting.
Yeah. And I don't know that they're feeling it quite yet. Some are. But on November 1st, when 56,000 North Dakotans lose their SNAP benefits, people are going to be feeling it.
Yeah.
And the state can't pick it up. The state can't go in and fix that. So people are going to feel it.
I mean, and that's not the fault of any state of North Dakota official.
Nope.
This is a federal program.
It's a federal program.
But it's a federal program. They're going to do the best of what they can. And we did. I mean, Governor Armstrong, I thought the loan program through the Bank of North Dakota was a great idea. Kind of papering over some of the, helping to bridge the gap for some of the workers. But there's a limit on what the state of North Dakota can do. If SNAP benefits go away, people are going to be hurting. If we get these health insurance premium hikes, people are going to be hurting. And in the meantime, while Congress can't function, it's letting the executive branch run away with things. So things like tariffs, these tariffs are hurting North Dakota farmers, or crop prices are low. Some of this stuff where, the Trump administration, Congress has no check on Trump as he's going to start importing beef from
Argentina.
And it's gonna hurt, ranchers in North Dakota, which, by the way, is a good segue, because our next guest on Friday is going to be Val Wagner. She's a candidate for president of the North Dakota Farm Bureau, which is one of the most important agriculture groups in the state of North Dakota. And by the way, her and her husband ranch. That's how they make their living in the world. So I think it's going to be a very interesting perspective on some of that. We're going to talk with her coming up on Friday. Thank you as always for listening. Remember, you can always reach us, send us a voicemail, send us a text, 701-587-3141. Follow us on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, X, @PlainTalkND is our handle. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.
people are only saying really, really good things about you. So I think it's only downhill from here.